Last week, Boris Johnson announced that schools may restart face-to-face lessons in early March. The announcement reignited the debate about the risk to teachers. Angela Rayner, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, claimed,
teachers are frontline key workers. By virtue of them going in the classroom, by virtue of them being out on the front line, like many of our other key workers, they are more at risk of catching the infection.
And last week, the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, suggested teachers should be moved up the priority list for vaccinations. They're not the only ones to suggest that teachers are at risk from COVID. In early January, loyal listener Layla spotted this headline in the Times educational supplement.
Teacher COVID rates up to 333% above average.
And she wrote to moreorless@bbc.co.uk to ask,
surely this is too high. I've often heard it reported that schools are a safe environment and that teachers are at no increased risk.
Charlotte MacDonald is here to tell us all about this. Hello, Charlotte.
Hi, Tim. Well, the statistic in the Times educational supplement is taken from data supplied by the Teachers Union, NASUWT. They got information from 3 local authorities, Leeds, Birmingham and Greenwich, about the numbers of COVID cases reported amongst teachers and education staff each week. Then they did their own calculation to compare that data to the community COVID rate for each local authority.
So we're only looking at 3 local authorities here.
Yeah, but the Teachers Union thought all 3 showed a big difference between the rates for reported cases in education staff and cases in the wider community. In Leeds, the average weekly prevalence rate in primary schools was around 1,090 cases per 100,000 education staff. In secondary schools, it was 1,750 cases per 100,000 staff. Compare that to the wider community, where the figure was only around 404 per 100,000 people. It's these Leeds figures which are behind the headline which claims teachers were 3 times more likely to catch COVID.
But, Charlotte, I notice you keep saying reported cases, and is that the same thing as the number of positive test results?
Yeah, you noticed that, did you? Yeah, well, we asked the NASUWT about that, and they told us they asked for the number of positive cases reported to the authority, which they admitted was likely to be self-reported.
So these numbers aren't based on positive test results? And if a teacher's off sick, concerned that they might have COVID, they could still be counted even if they never have a positive test.
Yes, exactly. Now, that's the reason Leeds Council told us they don't think you can compare their data on possible infection rates in schools to the community. Remember that even in the worst moments of the crisis, the majority of COVID tests come back negative. A lot of people who think they have symptoms, fortunately, don't have the virus detectable in their system. And there's another problem too. Leeds Council say their data might include some double counting. If a teacher's off work for a couple of weeks, they might be counted several times because of the way the data is collected. For their part, Birmingham Council say they don't recognise the figures in the Times educational supplement, saying it appears the data has been misunderstood or misrepresented. The Teachers Union acknowledged the possibility of double counting, but said double counting alone couldn't explain what they called the huge variation between school staff rates and whole population rates. They also pointed to rates they had calculated for education staff in Scotland, which they say showed a similar pattern.
OK, so we think there are definitely problems with the data behind this headline. Do we have a more solid source of information?
Good question. The Office for National Statistics have looked at the death rates in different jobs during the pandemic between March and December. For every 100,000 working-age people, it found 31 men and 17 women had died of COVID-19. Secondary school teachers had a somewhat elevated risk, with 39 deaths per 100,000 male teachers and 21 for female teachers. Compare that to 119 deaths per 100,000 male catering managers and 110 deaths per 100,000 male care workers. Secondary school teachers are at slightly more risk, but some other professions are dramatically more exposed to deadly infection. And when you include primary school teachers, the teaching profession as a whole was actually less at risk of death than the working age average. Now, of course, schools were largely closed from April through to September, but the majority of deaths from across the population took place either in April, reflecting infections in March, when schools were open, or in the autumn, when schools were also open.
Interesting. Now, of course, we know that the risk from COVID is closely related to your age, and actually teaching is a fairly young profession. So maybe deaths aren't the best way of looking at the risk. Is there a study that just looks at infections during a period where schools were open?
OK, well, there was one large-scale survey called the Schools Infection Survey, which carried out testing in 105 schools over 2 weeks in November, around the same time as the data from the teaching union. That found, amongst primary and secondary school staff, the average positivity rate was 1.29%. The average modelled national positivity rate for that period was 1.23%.
So fractionally higher for teachers, but certainly not 3 times higher.
And that survey also came with a warning to say the data couldn't represent all schools in England because schools in areas of England where COVID infection was highest at the start of the school year were overrepresented. In other words, we're comparing the national population to schools where COVID cases among students and teachers were higher than the national average. Data from the Office for National Statistics, which looked at schools between September and mid-October, also found that there was no significant difference in the risk of teachers testing positive compared to key workers or other professions.
Well, thank you.